I'm sincerely sorry. I just thought it was all squared away. And anyway, so Mr. President, I'll move the A50 amendment.
Senator Abeler reports the A50 amendment. The Secretary will report the A50 amendment.
Senator Abeler moves to amend House File Number 3100. The first unofficial engrossment as follows. Page 15 after line 22, insert. This is the A50 amendment.
Senator Abeler, to your A50 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, we've seen a version of this before on the education policy bill. This is the Rule of 90 for teachers. It includes all the teachers. As I understand, actually I tried to get this done, Mr. President. I think it was 2001. And the other body that we once served in together at the time accepted it, and this body did not. So it's been on my mind, and I've heard nothing but concern about the plight of teachers. As you know, Mr. President, we're having a hard time finding enough teachers to hang in there. The challenges in the classrooms are remarkable. Through COVID, through all the discipline issues, the violence in schools. Some are even afraid to stand in the hallway during passing times. And to earn a wage that is not that remarkable, Mr. President, given the level of their training. And so at least many have a chance to look forward to a retirement that makes sense, except for those who get to work virtually until they're 90. That's the current rule of 90. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. However, it seemed like this has been a big interest this session. Now, there was a rally, and there was a group of Tier 2 teachers, which feel like they were the second-rate teachers, about how they didn't get hired on just early enough. And so, Mr. President, this would take effect in 2028. And so it doesn't have anything to do with the current target. But I think that this would be a way for this body to say, let's get this into the conference. Let's find a way to talk about it. Many people spoke at that rally. I was not able to be speaking at that rally, but I was hanging around the hallways and the size of it. And these teachers were really hoping that they could have this opportunity to actually retire while they still had enough of their vigor, and after they've invested so much in their students. And so that's my request. And if I should ask for a roll call, that'd save somebody the chance of standing up to ask for that. Mr. President, I can request that. But members, I think this is our chance to say the Senate is actually interested in this. So that's all. Thank you.
Senator Abeler, did you request a roll call?
I just did, yeah, just to save somebody else.
Yeah,
save Senator Klein from jumping up.
Give me a chance to acknowledge it. Roll call requested, roll call granted. Were you finished, Senator Abeler? I didn't want to cut you off. I just want to make sure that...
I could talk longer, but that's
no,
good
you
enough
don't
for
need
now.
to.
All right, thank you.
It's quite okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Abeler. Would Senator Abeler yield for a question?
Senator Abeler, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Abeler, I know we have many fine teachers serving in the Senate. I know we have a lot of them watching us. I know Rule of 90 reinstatement was a topic of discussion. As the child of two teachers, I wanted to ask, do you know what it would cost the state's budget to implement Rule of 90 now?
Okay, got it. Senator Abeler, to the question.
Mr. President, I do not know the exact number, but I do believe it's a lot. And I think every penny on this would be worthwhile for these important teachers who are serving our children in these challenging times. And so I just know, Mr. President, and not to dilly on the answer, but I know there were speakers at this rally there that say they were going to fight for this to make it happen. And so whatever we can do, Mr. President, this is the full meal deal. This is going to conference. And so we could come back with like the children's platter size, or maybe like the mid-sized kids meal, or maybe there's a do with the Hungry Man Swanson's dinner thing. So thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Abeler yield for another question?
Senator Abeler, will you yield? He will yield for another question. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Abeler. Well, the number for reinstituting Rule of 90 about now is about $6.1 billion, and I would like to ask Senator Abeler, which budget would you recommend that money come out of in the current biennium?
Senator Abeler, to that question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Friends, it's a really good question. I do want to point out there was a precedent to spend into the 28-29 budget already. In the health bill, we're spending because we're taking one-time money to spend in the health bill, there's about $1.3 billion impact in that budget there. And I appreciate the optimism of the leaders to put that kind of spending into the tails. That's a very important thing to do. We're buying rates for counselors and other people who are in the mental health world. So, Mr. President, this doesn't actually have to be passed in its whole form, but we are now passing a bill that could actually go to conference. But, Mr. President, I don't see the rule of anything in any of the bills that we've been passing, and I told my teachers I would help. And so I think, Senator Friends, if you wanted to come back with a $1 billion proposal coming back from conference, even find a way to take part of that $17 billion that we have and decide this was a priority, because it seemed like when the teachers are here, this was a priority. And so, Mr. President, for me, it remains a priority. And so, Senator Friends, I think it would be worth the discussion. And then, because I put it in 28-29, there's ample time for the legislature to address the costs, even as we have decided in the Health and Human Services budget that $1.3 billion there can be dealt with at some future time. Thank you.
Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, members, to be quite clear, I'm asking you to vote no on this amendment. Second, members, the question was, where would we find the money to cut out of the other part of the budget? And with all due respect, I don't know that we got an answer, although I heard the suggestion that we might cut $1.3 billion out of the health budget. I don't think that's a good idea. What we do think is a good idea is to vote for this bill unamended, and what I'm asking members to do, Mr. President, is to reject the Abeler amendment. Thank you.
Any other discussions on the 850 amendment? Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would encourage a no vote on the A50. While I know that I'm interested in working on teacher pension reform, unfortunately, this amendment isn't paid for and would add billions of dollars in unfunded liabilities to our Teacher Retirement Association pension fund. And I do want to note that the underlying bill actually has 6 times more money for TRA than what Governor Walz proposed in his budget. And so I would encourage members to vote no. We don't want to get in the practice of increasing benefits without matching it with additional funding and assets. That's going to lead to problems for our pension fund in the future.
Any more discussion before we go through the author of the amendment, who will be the last voice we hear before we vote? Seeing none, Senator Abeler.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And, we talked about Mother's Day this morning, and my mom talked about saving the best for last. I forgot to mention this morning, she's 96, and she's really looking forward to that brunch that we were talking about. So, but she's also a teacher, and she loved to teach, and she was able to be a teacher as she would raise her 6 kids, and one of those things was that she was able to be home when we were home, and it meant a lot. And so, I don't know that we can afford $6 billion in 2028. And Senator Friends, I was not talking about cutting the Health and Human Services budget in 2028. I was talking about how the leadership here has set up a structure where we're overspending into 28 and 29 by $1.3 billion. And so if we're overspending like that, then let's see what other priorities we want to vie for. And, Mr. President, this amendment doesn't have to come back just the way it is. But I don't see the word rule of 90, in the proposals here, and I think it's time for us to give those teachers their fair shake. I want every teacher who's within the sound of my voice, which is only a couple, but maybe they're listening, Mr. President, to know that it's the Senate that has an interest in helping them attract good people in the special ed arena, which they're very short of, and some of the STEM programs with the science and technology and math, and people that could be any number of things, but they would choose teaching, which, Mr. President, I think is one of the highest callings, and I admire that. So I don't know where the votes lie, but, Mr. President, I know I'm going to be voting yes on behalf of my mother's work that she's done, and behalf of the so many teachers I've heard that are in their 30s who want a chance to get into their, to see this career go and to show that the Senate, Mr. President, in fact, does care. So I urge a green vote. Oh, I almost said, Mr. President, I urge a green vote. Thank you.